I Saw My Soul, God and Heaven. A DXM trip report by Trippy Trip Corey, uploaded to Earwid December 24th, 2001. On Tuesday night, I took an 8 ounce of Robitussin maximum strength cough syrup. I got even more motor weirdness than the last time. After about 4 hours, my brain felt like it was fried, and the general feeling was a combination of LSD, enhanced mind stimulation, unreality, ketamine, with slurred speech, floatiness and motor impairment, and ecstasy, euphoria, as well as alcohol, a decreased ability to communicate and lack of inhibition. The shifting, dizzy visual field was present in the beginning, but faded after a while. I had great difficulty walking and going to sleep. 2 bong hits during the trip didn't seem to have the usual weed effects. Hangover the next morning. Enjoyable, but not special. Thursday night was quite a different story. I took a 5 ounce of Robo, and then 2 hours later I took 3 ounce of Robo. In theory, this should have been a weaker trip, but I turned out to be wrong. Possibly there was some cumulative effect from the Tuesday trip, but I don't know really. After 1.5 hours I felt goofy and light. Then I went with 2 friends to a library. It was difficult for my eyes to focus on anything. I found every comment that anyone said funny. I felt goofy, but also a little bit paranoid. I smiled at these 2 people uncontrollably. I saw another friend and had a brief conversation about acid, spiders and DXM. My speech was slurred and continued to slur the whole night. We returned to Person X's house, where I took the remaining 3 ounce of Robo. People and comments were becoming very unreal. The paranoia was heightened to the point where I wondered whether passersby were friends or enemies. This was not like acid paranoia though, because I felt generally pleasant the whole time. I was not able to blink very much during this period, and my friends said I appeared glassy-eyed and distant. I was scaring them, and yet I was having a great time. Pretty soon, I got the sensation that my brain was fried. This is just how I felt, not a statement about reality. I was feeling crazy or insane. I read too much into what people were saying. I felt like Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver when he was staring at the pimps in the restaurant. We went to visit a friend at a hotel. Very mild hallucinations started. They were very different from LSD hallucinations in at least 2 ways. One being LSD hallucinations exist side by side with waking reality, as far as my experiences go. DXM hallucinations are more like vivid recollections. 2. LSD visuals seem very 2-dimensional. In retrospect, DXM visuals are very much 3D. So 3D that they can seem 4D. It's almost like wearing a virtual reality mask. For some reason, I imagined that my friends and I had gone to 7-Eleven, but they said that was not the case. My friends and I returned to the house. The DXM had shifted gears on me. I drifted into another world. My thoughts had become a hallucinatory field. The visuals could be interrupted by another person's speech, but only briefly. I kept jumping from the real world to the Dex world and back and forth. One of my friends said something about Japan. I said that I had always considered Japan as a part of the West, but then I wondered, why did I ever think that? I was struck by the fact that it was all bullshit and conditioning. All the bullshit that I'd ever been fed came to me in a rush of clarity. I could actually see the bullshit. My friend talked about the process of conditioning, but I only caught fragments of her speech and occasional glimpses of her face. The hallucinatory field was almost total now. In the Dex world, I saw myself as a bird. I was flying rapidly from South America to North America, seeing all of the countries as they actually were, although there were more trees present than exist in reality. I saw how my conditioned views were far different from reality. This thought has occurred to me many times before, but on DXM I could actually see the effects of the conditioning. It was quite emotional. This all came to me in a rush. Being this bird, I was uninhibited by artificial, political boundaries, sin fronteras. I could see how powerful and yet how arbitrary borders were. I was amazed. I went into my friend's room in total awe. I was completely uninhibited, and I told her that I felt comfortable sharing my soul with her. I was struck by the fact that I'm so afraid to tell people what I'm really thinking and feeling in everyday life. My friend and I talked for a while, but I don't remember what we said exactly. I just remember feeling very excited and euphoric, slightly similar to ecstasy. My friend had an angelic aura about her that I could clearly see. Soon, I left my friend's room. All the nerve endings in my body felt fried or maxed out. Thoughts came out semi-automatically and did not require the usual processing. Indeed, processing became impossible. Everything just flowed. I was truly amazed by my experiences so far, because I had only planned on getting fucked up. I didn't expect these psychedelic revelations, but the best was yet to come. When I turned the lights out, the most amazing thing happened. All pain seemed to leave my body. The hallucinatory field became total. I saw the frontal lobe of a brain suspended in darkness. The folds of the brain separated into 3D cubes that slowly rolled forward in unison. I was gliding on the cubes, and yet standing apart from them at the same time. Each cube contained an image, a memory of mine. When I saw a particular image that caught my eye, I could focus in on it and re-experience the memory. It was as if I had total recall of everything I had ever done, but somehow I could control which memories I recalled and which ones I didn't. I truly thought during these moments that I had seen my entire soul, heaven, and God all at the same time. This was strange to me, because I don't believe in God or heaven, and I believe that the soul is a set of biochemical processes, not separate from the mind. I went outside to smoke a cigarette. As I looked up at the sky, I could recall perfectly my third acid trip. Not just the visuals, but the feeling behind it. I felt godlike in my revelations, and yet I also felt more human than I ever felt before. When I re-entered the house, I felt a sense of total joy, peace, and love. I was so excited by what I had seen, that I told my friend all about it. She said later that she had never seen me so excited. I told her that as long as we both shall live, that we should never ever forget that I had just seen God. I went back to my bed and closed my eyes. The visuals returned. The most memorable was a blue flame that was coming towards me. It was not a burning flame, however, but a cleansing flame. Soon afterwards, I got the distinct sensation, and visuals to go along with it, that my soul was leaving my body. I walked to the kitchen to get some water. As I was in the kitchen, I thought I had left my body behind. I want to re-emphasise that I still could not understand how I was even capable of rational thought. The insane feeling, however, had passed, and as I returned from the kitchen, I saw that my body was not lying on the bed. I guess I hadn't even left my body after all, but it felt so real. I was so full of joy, it's really hard to describe. After this point, I decided to get some sleep. The come down was gradual, no hangover in the morning. I felt completely refreshed the next day. It had been one of my most fulfilling experiences ever. As pleasant as it was, I had no immediate desire to repeat the experience. I remember how my past acid binge had been a failed attempt to recreate my first 4 amazing trips. I think I will Dex again, but always in moderation and with Olney's lesions in mind. God lives in a bottle of cough syrup. Wow.
The collapse of the universe. At approximately 2 p.m. of a Thursday afternoon, I made the decision to consume 700 milligrams of DXM, 250 milligrams more than what I was normally accustomed to. I was expecting nothing more than some closed-eye visuals and maybe some mild open-eye hallucinations if I was lucky. But little did I know that I was about to experience one of the most meaningful discoveries of my life. It was around 8 hours later when I had just entered the 4th plateau of my trip, and the hallucinations had begun. I was lying on my bed when everything in my room had suddenly appeared to come to life. The bed I was lying on engulfed and swallowed my body into its stomach. My skin had melted into the mattress, and objects in my room changed shape as a threat to my life. The phone cord folded up and formed a noose with itself. The people in my posters would pop out at me in a hostile 3D manner, etc. Knowing I was just tripping hardcore, I lay back calmly, enjoying the vivid illusions of my DXM trip. Somebody had called my cell phone, but when I picked up my phone, it transformed into a purple mushroom in my hand. Wanting to make sure if it was real, I attempted to eat it with no success, and eventually figured out how to receive phone calls on my new mushroom. I remember talking to my boyfriend on the phone for a little bit, though I have no recollection as to what we talked about or for how long. The only part of the conversation that I distinctly remember was when he mentioned that he had to leave. At this point in time, I found myself in the phone line, getting lost in the vortex of wireless service. Suddenly, The possibility that I would fade out of existence became so real to me that I truly believed I would be lost and gone forever if we were to lose connection over the phone. I begged him not to hang up, but he reassured me that nothing would happen and clicked off. The second he did, I felt an incredible rush of life escape from my body as my soul was torn from deep within my core. I knew at that euphoric state I was in that I was experiencing death. As my inner being left my body, my identity that I assumed to be real for so long was ripped from me. I was submerged with this extreme sense of freedom as my soul finally escaped the boundaries of the physical body. Then it came, that transient moment where the universe made complete perfect sense, and I was connected spiritually to all things in life. All concept of time was lost, as the past, present, and future had morphed into one single moment of eternity. Everything opposite suddenly became parallel to each other and joined in unison. I was intoxicated with an incredible surge of overwhelming chaos and peace. I found life in death, meaning and triviality, sensation and numbness, and an entirely different world in DXM. I had not expected a personal god, but a universal god of some sort emerged from deep within me. I saw an eternal moment, and a dying eternity unfolded before me. It was this unity between my soul and the cosmos that gave me the shocking awareness that this entire time I was a prisoner of the physical world, held captive to the boundaries of the flesh. In both losing myself and finding true existence, I lost my fear of death, as death merely became a passing moment into a higher level of existence, and I had realized all this in less than 3 Earth seconds. I had not been out of my body more than a few moments when a female deity, who I somehow recognized as being related to me in a past life, approached me. I was blinded with visions of deja vu. Memories of my previous lives and identities came flowing back to me in short frames and waves. Though oddly enough, I cannot remember those lives or identities the second I snapped back to reality. She was both old and young at the same time, and she seemed to be a god of some sort with intentions of protecting me. Concerned with my well-being, she asked me what had happened to that girl, referring to me, and I explained that she was no longer. I had transformed into a higher being in an alternate dimension of reality, and that girl had merely become another lifeless body. Like all physical things in this world, she was destined to evolve into non-existence. The deity, the guardian angel, whoever or whatever she was, instructed me to re-enter my body because my time to leave this world had not yet come. At this point, the world I had been previously living in had become so meaningless in retrospect that I did not care to go back. But trusting her character, I obliged and lay back down, whereupon she kissed the breath of life into me, and I immediately opened my eyes. The second I arose, I called my boyfriend to tell him of the intense near-death experience and my voyage into the spiritual realm. He automatically presumed that I was hallucinating, and the journey I just imagined was my subconscious sending me a sign about my rampant drug use. I felt that he held such a biased, superficial analysis of what I knew deep down to be a surreal and profound experience from another parameter of life. I knew right then from his unwillingness to follow me that I would be alone in my unworldly high, with nobody to share this divine intervention and explore the depths of the unseen with. To this day, even long after falling out of my trip, I truly believe that DXM opened up a gateway and gave me access to a forbidden, hidden dimension of reality. DXM has definitely exposed my mind to the possibility of so much more, and even in a completely sober state, I often find myself questioning what we as humans believe to be as real. In the end, I believe this encounter has made an overall positive impact in my life. Loved ones around me commented that I am much more in touch with my feelings, and more empathetic towards others, and overall have an elevated aura of inner peace. The Collapse of the Universe Part 2. This shit's a long, intense, deep, and potentially scary journey. Only plan to do it if you're prepared for a life-altering revelation. DXM Trip Number 2. This was not my first experience with Robitussin cough gels. I had success with a happy and meaningful trip. Last time I mixed 300 mg of cough gels with 350 mg of Robitussin honey cough syrup. I have had out-of-body experiences before with 700 to 800 mg plus a DXM. and this time I decided to increase the trip and go all out by increasing the dosage and decreasing the dosage time. I was grabbing a handful of gel caps and swallowing 10 to 20 pills in single mouthfuls. Due to the intensity of the dosage, I immediately began to feel the effects within 20 minutes, something that has never occurred to me before with regular cough syrup. I was sitting on a couch with 3 of my friends, watching some TV show on DVD, but I have no recollection of anything beyond the first 3 episodes. How long I blacked out for, I do not remember, but I presume the duration to have been at least a couple hours. I began remembering my trip a couple hours later, and it commenced with me visiting other parallel universes. I envisioned myself sleeping on my friend's lap on a sofa, and then I would zoom out to another parallel universe, where I was in a hot air balloon with all my friends, and there were white sheets draped all around us. Each time I zoomed out, I would simply go to a different reality in a microscopic universe, until I eventually zoomed out to where I was sitting down on the couch where this all started. This was when I finally woke up and realized where I was. I immediately sat up, asking my friends if I had just woken up or if I was still asleep. My friends informed me that I had not slept or moved positions on the couch that entire time. As I took a look at my surroundings, I was unsure as to where I was. I thought I was on the 3rd floor of some house. As I looked up at the ceiling, there was furniture hanging upside down. The walls seemed to be made of flimsy cloth. A toy train was dashing around on the top shelf, and stairs seemed to be emerging from the entrance of the bathroom. For some reason, this place looked oddly familiar, almost as if I had seen this exact setting in a previous dream of mine. My vision was heavily dreamlike. In fact, at this point I had forgotten I had taken the DXM, and believed that I had fallen asleep on the couch and was in fact dreaming. I had never experienced visions like this before on DXM, or any hallucinogen for that matter. I became confused and became unable to tell if I had taken DXM at all, or if I had concocted this whole thing in a dream. I asked my friends what drugs I had done just to be sure, and they told me that I had snorted a drug called purple chalk. Though I hadn't really, it was an attempt to make me trip harder. I wondered if that was the reason I blacked out and couldn't remember anything. As they spoke to me, I visualized us walking towards a car in a parking lot. This exact setting, in this car, with the purple chalk, and what they had told me, suddenly triggered the most intense feelings of deja vu. As I tried to recall where I had heard this before, I remembered that I had foreseen it in one of my parallel universes earlier. I had envisioned the future. I zoomed out to another parallel universe, where we were back in the hot air balloon. There were other balloons all around us, and we seemed to be in an auditorium of some sort, all the balloons hanging as ornaments. I realized that this connection of hot air balloon decorations was the entire galaxy. I looked back at one of my friends and suddenly became frightened when what I saw was not him, but an alien boy. He was so frail, small, and thin. I was afraid that I had broken his legs by sitting on them, and immediately began to look for any wounds or broken bones. I put his hand up to mine, and as I observed his long spindly fingers, knew that he meant no harm. I thought about how ugly the human species was, and how closely we resemble alien figures. DXM seemed to bring out the inner alienness in everybody. I saw a little bit of extraterrestrial life in all of them. I stood up to use the restroom, but in my attempt ended up falling on my friend's lap. The moment he caught me was the exact moment I had just zoomed out to another parallel universe, so I distinctly believed that I fell out of the sky from one universe to the next. The couch transformed into a wooden bench to swing from, and it was hanging from space by 3 thin strings. A cloud generator appeared, and pink and blue clouds were created and floating in line formation. There were people from far distant galaxies trying to communicate with me by typing out messages on the clouds. I sipped the clouds through a straw and they disappeared. My friends decided to relocate to my house because the house we were in began to get crowded with people. The walk back to the car seemed infinite, and though I knew the car was a mere few feet away, it seemed as if I had walked through a maze to get there. As we were back in the car, I glanced at my friend sitting next to me. I distinctly heard music coming out of him, but his mouth was closed, so I concluded that the music was coming out of his eye sockets. Back in my house, I found myself entering the fourth plateau. As I lay down in my room and closed my eyes, I saw myself enter paradise. Paradise was a dark green jungle, misted with a layer of fog. The jungle was also in the shape of a cube, and no matter what side of the cube you were on, you couldn't fall off. The only inhabitants of this haven were all females with black hair. I saw my sister there and some other girls I did not recognize. I opened my eyes and shared with my friends this wonder I had visited. I closed my eyes in an attempt to revisit this place, but found myself underwater, drowning in a river. As I drowned, a part of my id, my ego, was torn from my brain. When I snapped out of it, I noticed that there was an incredibly empty feeling in my head, as if something important was absent. My brain physically felt hollow, and I knew that I had lost that portion of my personality forever in another dimension. Apparently, I suffered from a mild case of hysteria, because my friends told me later that I had woken up out of my trip screaming. I visited many fantasies that day. Every time I closed my eyes, it was a new adventure. All I can say is that I've never experienced a trip so visually powerful before. Robitussin and Cough Joes are definitely the way to go. Afterward. My conclusion from this is that I have completely rejected the physical work. I truly believe that DXM taps into the extrasensory portion of my brain that communicates with the paranormal, which makes me able to experience supernatural phenomena that I normally wouldn't receive sober. I've heard stories of people getting ESP and having crazy occurrences happen to them after dropping DXM. There must be a reason why all spirits and aliens that we communicate with all exhibit similar behaviors, and why many of us in the fourth plateau have such surreal voyages. There must be a reason why all who visit this other realm begin to reject physical life and desires of the flesh. Those who call me crazy have yet to open their eyes to the possibility of something beyond this realm. I'm not insane, just enlightened. Take me higher.
Life and death. Nothing really matters. A DXM and cannabis trip report by Reefer Spirit, uploaded to Earwid November 10th, 2020. This is kind of long, but it's very detailed. The names have been changed. A little after noon, my friend Damien picked me up. He knew what he was doing, but I'd never done voodoo before, just because I couldn't get it without drinking bottles of cough syrup. In preparation, neither of us had eaten anything that day. Around 1, we each took 1 pill. This was not cough medicine, it was pure DXM. I'm not exactly sure how many milligrams were in the pills or anything, but it was some strong shit. It takes a while for the capsules to open the stomach, so we had plenty of time to smoke a joint before we felt any effects from the voodoo. We drove down into the woods to this cool little cave where Damien and his roommates liked to trip. Since it was during the day and in August, Damien informed me that we'd have to go somewhere cold and dark, because the heat and bright light would make us really, really sick and completely miserable. We brought sleeping bags to keep warm, several bottles of Sprite and water, and a kerosene lamp. On the way down, I could feel the capsule open in my stomach. We got all our shit set up in the cave, which was a little room, big enough for maybe 3 people to lie down in, with tunnels leading off in 4 different ways. About 10 minutes after I felt the capsule open, my body started to feel extremely heavy. Damien had this feeling too, and we laid down. He'd warned me that we would get sick, and since weed helps me to keep me from puking, we'd brought about 5 or 6 joints and a huge resin weed ball. I started to feel a little sick, but it was so hard to move because I felt so heavy. We smoked another joint. It was getting harder and harder to move, so before it got any more difficult, we sort of crawled and slid to a lower part of the cave. After this point, I can't remember all the details or exactly what order everything happened, but I will describe it as well as possible. I remember stretching out on a small ledge about 2 or 3 feet off the ground. I puked a couple of times, but it wasn't a problem because I knew it was going to happen. Then, I felt like I was rising off the ground. I stayed floating for a few minutes, maybe 8 inches off the ground. I'd been just staring straight ahead, and when I looked around, I realised I was moving my hands around. Then, my entire body went numb, and I wasn't floating anymore. I think I asked Damien about it, but he was too fucked up to answer me. After a few minutes, it occurred to me that I was puking again, and I hadn't even realised it. I was staring straight ahead, and the rock wall became a beautiful Native American city, sort of like Mesa Verde. I remember seeing 3 white doors sewn together with dark red stitching and orange outlines. They disappeared, and I saw about 5 windows in a wall built of carved square stones. Then, I saw ladders leading to bigger doorways, and it all started to sparkle like it was sprinkled with gold. All of this appeared with a reddish tint, I suppose because the only light we had was fire. I forgot where I was, but I didn't care. I think the whole time I was watching this, I was mumbling stuff like, wow, thank you, I love you, etc. Just saying it over and over without realising it. I remember asking Damien, do you see it? And he said he did. Then I got sick again, even though I thought that part was over. I think he was puking then too. After a few minutes, we were slightly more conscious, and I thought it was starting to wear off. Then came the next wave. I looked down off my little ledge and saw through the floor into an underground city full of sparkling gold. I tried to touch it, but I couldn't reach. I'm not positive what happened next. I was so far gone. I didn't know I was in a cave with Damien, or who I even was. I didn't know I was on drugs. I must have realised I didn't know what was going on, because I recall saying, I forgot what reality is like. Then I floated off again, and I can't even remember what happened for a little while. I think I started to puke again. I was breathing so loudly, it was more like moaning. I could hear it, but I didn't think about what it was. That went on for most of the rest of the trip. I started to get a little scared, and I think I was crying, but I'm not sure. Damien was mumbling apologies for something. I don't have any idea what my body was doing for quite a while after this point. Just what I was thinking. I asked Damien if I was alive or dead, and he said, I know, or something like that. I thought that was disturbing, and asked him again. He said I was alive, but I wasn't sure if he was telling the truth. I wondered if I should be in the hospital. There was a point I was even considering never doing drugs ever again, if I lived. We were underground, and I thought maybe that was because I was already buried. I knew what it was like to die. I thought about how nobody would ever find our bodies way out here. Then, I slowly stopped caring. I still didn't know if I was dead or not, but it didn't really matter. I just kind of accepted it. Although, I wished that I could say goodbye to my lover. Another blank spot in my memory, probably still contemplating life and death. I came back a little, and realised I was breathing so hard, and told Damien I couldn't stop doing it. He was also in between the peaks of really intense shit, and he pointed out to me that I was shaking really bad. He told me I should get in a sleeping bag, but I couldn't move, so he sort of pulled me up a little and put it over me. When he moved, it made me dizzy, and I think I puked again. I'm not positive, but we may have started the resin ball here and smoked some before the next wave of the shit hit us. When it came, I don't remember as much about it as the first ones. I kept freaking out and asking him if it was still there, along with other weird questions, most of which I can't recall. I wanted to know what time it was, and he told me it was probably about 2 or 3. Big gap in my memory here, and more puking I think. The lantern went out, and I was freaking out about it. It seems like I was yelling about it, but I don't think I could have yelled at the time, since it's hard even to talk correctly. I later learnt that only people on DXM could understand other people on DXM. Damien was considerably more sober than I was by now, since he'd done it a bunch of times and is also about twice my size. He dragged me to another place in the cave where there was a little light coming in from the opening. He wrapped me in a sleeping bag, and then he went to the house and took another part of a pill. I came down a little when he was dragging me around, but then it hit me again. Not quite as bad as before though. I don't remember what happened while he was gone, or knowing he was back, but when I came down again, he was laying next to me and we smoked another joint. We just laid there for who knows how long. I can't really describe the feeling. It wasn't intense, but it was not the more conscious feeling we experienced in between peaks. I had my eyes closed the whole time, but I wasn't asleep. I saw visions on the back of my eyelids. Damien later told me he was doing the same thing. I couldn't move voluntarily yet, and I was still occasionally breathing hard and couldn't stop shaking. My watch kept beeping. I thought it was like every 10 minutes or so. Only later did it occur to me that it only beeps every hour. We woke up every so often and smoked a joint. Around 7 or 8 PM, Damien's roommate came down into the cave and we kind of snapped out of it a little and finished the resin ball. I could sit up now. We crawled out of the cave, but we had to stay in the shade because our eyes were still extremely sensitive to light. Voodoo vision. We went back to the house and laid on the couch watching movies and listening to music till about 11 PM because we were still slightly retarded and didn't want to move. I couldn't see as well the next couple of days, but that's to be expected from any hallucinogenic drug. It was an amazing trip. I feel like I know what death is like, and I am not as afraid of it as I used to be.